audience.
Simmer down.
We're not ready yet, though.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order and recognize that we're on a meeting on the traditional territories of the Hupachasit and Seashop First Nations. And I guess we move right to reconvening our meeting of the Committee of the Whole meeting Thursday, December 5th, 2019 at 6 p.m.
Move to accept, or whatever you need.
Okay, seconder? Second. All in favor? Motion is carried. That's going to be awkward, eh?
It's not.
Our first presentation tonight is economic development. Welcome, Mr. Deacon, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you this evening. This presentation varies slightly from the template, but covers the ground you are likely to want to know about. Business retention work is normally considered more effective and efficient than business attraction because we are interacting with businesses who are already in Port Alberni and understand their locational challenges and opportunities. In recent months, I've worked with Catalyst and the Sand Group, but I have also worked with many small businesses, sole proprietorships, and others known as mom and pop operations. Diversification of the economy is easy to say and harder to do, but we are making some headway in several sectors, including agriculture, aquaculture, tourism, clean tech, and as well as several aspects of the marine industry. The economic development function is playing a part in many areas of Council's strategic plan and doing so without any new funding. However, I want to make two comments here. One, I acknowledge that your council and previous ones have been very considerate with respect to economic development budget allocations. And two, I enjoy the challenge of doing more with the same dollars. Having said that, we may need a miracle on Argyle Street instead of a miracle on 34th Street to pull all of this off to yours, mine, and the CAO's satisfaction. I have the pleasure of working with a great crew here in the city, and we draw on every department to get our work done. Over the last month alone, I could cite at least a dozen different examples of this. I'll mention 6. 1, the city clerk took my rough draft of an agreement with the Port Authority for the food hub and ensured that it would work for both of us as well as our primary funder in this business incubator. 2, the building inspector and the fire marshal worked to ensure that 2 small businesses that I'm anxious to see open are being shepherded through the regulatory hoops. 3, the planner invited me to speak to her advisory planning committee council about the recommendations that have been brought to council with respect to cannabis cultivation. 4, the finance department fast-tracked the allocation of some rural dividend program funds so that I could get a report in before midnight, Saturday, November 30th. 5, the Parks, Recreation, and Heritage Department attended an evening trails meeting with me and signed up for further work on that initiative. And 6, the Public Works crew got several reports through to a couple of businesses that need to know exactly what is in our water for their operations. Other governments and other organizations are working with us to see that pain points in really good economic development initiatives are being addressed. Over the same last month, the MLA's office met with Cascadia Seaweeds and Great Central Lake Holdings. Community Futures is working on the facade improvement program, and the provincial nominee program Entrepreneur Immigration Regional Pilot. The Chamber is working on a Shop Port Alberni Christmas campaign. Alberni Valley Tourism developed and submitted our co-op marketing campaign to Destination BC, and the food hub would not have been possible without the Port Authority and our other partners, including the Newchamos Seafood Limited Partnership, Effingham Oysters, Cascadia Seaweed, North Island College, and the ACRD farm team. Citizens are stepping up too. This morning, I ran into Al McCullough from Pacific Chevrolet. He was at Mountain View Bakery picking up some goodies to take to a customer in Nanaimo. Last week, he delivered 2 vehicles to buyers in the Thompson-Okanagan region. And everywhere he goes, he talks Port Alberni up as a great place to live, raise a family, and be in business. I mentioned earlier that business retention was more effective than business attraction. However, it's getting harder and harder for businesses of all sizes to stay afloat for all of the reasons that are identified here. These are mentioned here only so that you are aware of some of the challenges we face. Give you a minute to read the slide, and then I'll move on.
Just have a quick question, and just maybe an abstract view. What has Langford done with regards to reducing barriers?
They're charging businesses a one-time business license fee only. So you don't have to renew year after year and pay the license fee, go through the process, and nor does the staff there have to get involved in dealing with it. So down there at the bottom, when I talk about business licensing, cost, time, and effort to process the business, between the money that we're investing in the economic development assistant and the time that is taking for the building inspector and the fire marshal, the finance department, and others that have to touch business license files, I'd be surprised if we actually cover our costs. And having said that, I'm fully aware of the implications of trying to do away without some regulatory oversight of the businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually surprised that it's such a time-consuming process to get a business license. So maybe that should be one of our priorities for the new year, as to how we can streamline that process.
We made it one of our priorities last year, and in fact, we took files that had been taking months to get approved, and we set ourselves a goal of approving home business licenses in 1 day and other business licenses in a week. I think we're doing pretty well. We had 133 new businesses incorporate last year, which I'm thrilled to see. That was about the previous year, 133 businesses to date this year. And last year there were 91 new businesses. But between processing the applications, working with the businesses that were slow to renew their license, and all. It is taking us a lot of time and effort. So the goals that we've set for ourselves with respect to service delivery times are among the most aggressive on Vancouver Island, and we did it deliberately because we felt we were quite far behind other communities. And I'm thrilled with the work that's being done, and it is taking that time and effort to make sure that we are delivering on our promise.
Councillor Stoll, do you have a question?
I do. When I look at the population of Langford when I look at the population of Langford, it's 35,342, and I'm looking at their site. How long does it take for a business to get a business license here? They just come in and they get one, or do they have to go through a whole process? I've never had to do that. I mean, the business has, but no.
So our goal is, assuming you're based in a commercial storefront and that you're in the correct zoning, our goal is to have your license to you within 7 days.
Mm-hmm. Which we beat Langford, because it says it takes approximately 10 days, and it also says you're right, $100 one-time fee. However, the commercial spaces over a certain square foot is a lot more one-time shot.
Yeah.
But I also look at their population base is quite a lot more, so their tax base is a lot better than ours, of course.
Their tax base is huge, and they can afford to do that, but they're also intent on reducing barriers to business operations.
And I remember Langford, I mean, it just boomed suddenly. Like, I remember where it was and how it just escalated in businesses and stuff, and it was a smart move, how their council and got these big, businesses to come into that community. So, yeah, it's interesting.
What really kicked them off was their decision to allow Costco to build in Langford. Every other municipality in the greater Victoria area had declined to see them come into place. Langford said, yeah, you can come here, and many other big box stores followed. And
there was a lot of discussion about that whole thing at the UBCM and ADICC amongst all the councillors and mayors. So yeah, it was kudos on them. Yeah, smart move.
They had one other advantage, that their housing prices were lower than pretty much every other municipality in the greater Victoria area, and their housing prices have gone up steadily.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you mind if I put you on the spot with the question about business licensing? There is a local businessman, and I'm sure that you know who I'm talking about, and he's probably talked to you about this as well. His idea is, instead of having business license revenue go into general revenue of the city, have it set aside to be used for businesses, beautification, or hold it for bigger projects, or have it as 50-50 for grants. What do you think of that idea?
I think that's a council decision.
That's a good one.
Yeah. There are communities that have seen business license revenue dedicated to either business improvement areas or chambers of commerce, and every community finds its way with that. Certainly if we were in a healthier economy, I think I would be pushing for that, as well as a one-time business license fee. And having said that, it's really a council decision. I think if I remember rightly, our annual revenues from business licenses are about $200,000. So I think we're approaching, isn't that close to 1%? Okay, thank you. Yep, thank you. Okay, moving on. There are also issues, risks, and opportunities related to attraction and to marketing. Again, I don't think I need to add anything to what you see here, but I'll give you 30 seconds to read that slide, and if there's anything you want to ask about, happy to respond.
Just a question, Mr. Deacon.
Mhm.
I guess there is no real answer to the neglected look of buildings, like when you go uptown and see some of the buildings that are out-of-town landlords and are in visible need of repair, just something, you know, as little as a coat of paint or some kind of upgrade. There's nothing,
So,
they're following all the rules and we can't really punish them for not being here.
Mr. Mayor, the rights of building owners are quite astonishing compared to some other jurisdictions around the world. We've tried a whole number of things. I mean, we have a building standards bylaw. We've adopted a facade improvement program. We've adopted a graffiti program. We've adopted a security initiatives program. We've brought on additional bylaw resources to begin hounding those building owners that are neglecting their properties. I think council and staff have done a lot of work, you know, hence the stick and carrot approach, because we've also implemented commercial revitalization tax exemption bylaws for now every area of the community, with an effort to say, you know, here's a carrot. We are probably due to take a look at I guess the bottom line that we've established for those revitalization bylaws. So each of them has a minimum of $100,000. And that may be too steep for some of the building owners. That's the reason why council adopted the facade improvement program, because it was aimed at building owners, business owners that were willing to spend anywhere between $5,000 and $30,000 to improve their look. Our best example is the building that the Power of Three now inhabits on the corner of Argyle and 3rd. That started off as a facade improvement program grant, and the owner of the building decided, once he got into it, he decided to keep going, and we're incredibly grateful. He lives in Vancouver. He owns a couple of other commercial buildings uptown, and he's also invested in them. So, you know, you just never know what is going to exactly trigger it. I think council's initiative to bring a community policing office uptown will also help, because I think that some building owners are you know, waking up to people sleeping in the doorways and saying, you know, why would I bother? But I think, you know, we've instituted a number of initiatives to try and address that specific thing. More work needs to be done.
Councillor Solda.
I'm just kind of curious. I know in Vancouver in 2018, they adopted I think it's 2018, a bylaw about empty buildings or homes and that tax. But they were putting together an empty storefront tax last year. I don't know if it went through in that, and it'd be interesting if we should look into something like that. I mean, if a storefront has been empty for a year or something like that, that's maybe we can figure something out and help them through that.
Yep. Thanks for that reminder, and we will take a look at it. Every year at the BC Economic Development Association conference, best practices in a whole number of fields, including this one, because it's an issue in almost every community, not just ours. And I brought back an approach that had been taken in Chilliwack and gave that to the manager of bylaw services. Unfortunately, it was 2 weeks before he moved on, so we haven't followed up with that. But there are others, whether it be the empty storefront or others, that we can look at.
Well, there's also like a few storefronts, not just in the 3rd Avenue area, but in Margaret Street area, are just using their empty storefronts for storage, right? And that's not what it's zoned for. It's commercial. It's not a storage place. So, I mean, we need to start looking at that too. I mean, if they're going to use it for storage, then we need to look at maybe the zoning, or we need to talk to them. And I think we need to move forward on that because it's been a long time coming.
You're right, and we do have a couple of active files that are addressing that very thing.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, further to that, Mr. Deacon, there is a vacant building bylaw, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't think anybody ever bothers to sign up, and I don't think there's any, there's no penalty for not signing your vacant building up. Is that correct?
I'd have to take a look at the bylaw again. I know that it's a matter of priorities, that I think the bylaw department, the clerk's department, every department is working flat out to make sure that their priorities, council's priorities, are being addressed. And I know we all have a concern about vacant buildings, and when a bylaw officer's time is taken up with individuals that are camping in our parks or in doorways and others, it really does become a matter of priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a thought, and you've probably thought of this already. We have the facade program. Have you ever discussed having a program to fix the interior of these buildings? Because if somebody wanted to lease a space, they're not going to go in and spend thousands of dollars to get it up to code. So if you can encourage these owners with financial stick as well, or financial carrot, and say, we'll pay, give you some money to fix it up so you can lease it out or whatever you need to do. Has that been discussed at all?
Well, that is really the premise around introducing the commercial revitalization tax exemption bylaw. So, with $100,000 minimum, the intent is that they will bring the building up to code. Fire code, building code are the two big issues that we have with many of our old buildings here. And we're aware that it probably takes that much money with most of the buildings to get them up to that standard. And we, having said that, Council's strategic plan identifies that the economic development function or office is to look at incentives, and we're aware that that is a priority. And it's a priority for all of us.
Councillor Solda.
Thank you. I don't know if this is in, I think it's more bylaws. We should have had bylaws standing here at the same time or something, but it's like when we look at these buildings and these storefronts, and some of them still need work. We do have buildings that still need some repairs done, as an example, and I'm going to name them because it's been an ongoing issue, for me at anyways, is the squash court. Do we have an idea when they are going to be finished? Is that a different department's answer, or, and we've had a lot of people asking that kind of question, you know, because we're trying to get the uptown cleaned up as a start, and that particular building is.
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, the clerk's department and the bylaw department and Community Futures, who are running our facade improvement program, have all been discussing that issue. We've given the owner of the building until March of 2020 to complete, or they will not be eligible for the facade improvement program. I know that the acting manager of bylaw has delivered a strong message to the owner of that building and others very recently.
And some of these empty buildings, I love the idea of a pop-up stores, and maybe if we went and looked at an empty storefront tax or something like that, it might let some of the owners, oh, okay, you want to have a pop-up? Let's do a pop-up store, because there's a lot of people that have things that they want to sell maybe for 6 months, but they don't want a whole year lease, and it might be something to look into. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. So, last slide, dealing with issues, risks, and opportunities, talks about grants, and I have a slide further on in the presentation that details the grants that we've secured over the last 2 years. The issue with grants is that the capacity is not always in place to deliver on the project that we've undertaken to secure the grant for, and there is not always a complete alignment with priorities. We've been, I think, very conscientious of that, and will continue to be so. So more about this as we get on into the grants. So budget history from 2013 to 2020. There's been, as you will see in 2016, the Council of the Day voted to move an economic development assistant who was part-time to a full-time basis. We also introduced the facade improvement program, and we contracted the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to deliver on a couple of programs for us. In the following year, Council increased the consulting fees that were available to this function. In 2018, we didn't spend all of our marketing funds, in part because I was squirreling them away, and this is something that the finance department does not really like. because it creates headaches for them, and I'm very grateful for their accommodation, but squirreling them away so that we could be investing more heavily in marketing this year and next, given that we'd secured some grant funds that were going to allow us to move on there. So these are the grants that the Economic Development Office has secured over the last 2 years. The other departments have also been successful in securing grants. So this chart really goes through project, amount of grant, the year in which it was secured, the cash that the city needs to contribute in order to secure it, the in-kind contributions that we committed to, and the other column probably doesn't need to be there, but it's just an acknowledgement that the grant does impact every other department, or could impact every other department. Food Hub is an example. I mentioned earlier that the clerk had been involved in the agreement between ourselves and the Port Authority. The clerk was involved in the agreement between ourselves and the Ministry of Agriculture. So the finance department is going to, in effect, flow the funds through, but we are going to have to produce reports for it. Our building inspector has already been down there to take a look at it. So in virtually every situation, other departments of the city get involved in some way, shape, or form. So it represents more of an in-kind contribution, but there's opportunity costs that take place. So moving on, draft expenditures for next year. I think really what I'd like to say is that I'm grateful that this council and previous ones have recognized the need both for personnel and a marketing budget to get us up and running.
Councillor Poon.
Just wondering, how many staff do you have in your department?
One, besides myself.
Oh, one beside yourself. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any more questions for Mr. Deacon? Councillor Solda.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation, because it's really great to hear what's happening in the Economic Development Office. I'd like to hear more from you in the future, just to know what's going on and not the one-offs. I'd like to hear updates all the time. Thank you.
Thanks. I understand that we're moving to at least quarterly presentations for council. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deacon. Up next, ladies and gentlemen, we have Public Works and Mr. Takama. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Brought some of our good water in case I talk too much. Okay. Okay, it looks like we're good to go. And this is just big button up. Is that how it works? Big buttons up, that one's down?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm bringing to you the Engineering and Public Works Council brief with the information on the draft operating and capital budget. those are the sort of the contents that we'll be going through, similar to everyone else. So our mission and services are to provide high-quality services through the responsible design, construction, and operation of city infrastructure and systems. And our core services include provision of high-quality drinking water, the construction, operation, and maintenance of water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, as well as the transportation network. And last but not least, the collection of residential solid waste. So how we align with council's strategic priorities and projects that align with that. In the strategic plan under responding to demographic change and improving quality of life, we have a number of projects around revitalizing 3rd Avenue and Argyle Street, as well as the entrance to Harbor Q. So there's $1.5 million in the draft capital plan over the next 3 years to do that. Council's also committed to reviewing the active transportation plan in 2020. That's quite a number of years old, and also has asked us to update the engineering standards in conjunction with planning. Yeah, under the goal of championing the environmental leadership, we are working with the ACRD on the organics diversion project. Under fostering a complete community, we're also involved in, and this was of course brought up with Parks and Rec, and again will affect a number of departments, but the Victoria Quay to Harbor Quay link and trail connectivity, and I believe Mr. Deacon had it as well in his presentation, so that's something that is not only big project for council, but for the entire organization.
Is the organics ball sort of in ACRD's court right now?
Yeah, we're meeting regularly with them. They're probably working more at it at this point. We're waiting on them to see exactly if they're going ahead with a pilot project, at the landfill, or what the status of where we can take the material to is. I mean, we're ready with our trucks. What we're not ready with is with bins, but again, that's also in the strategic priorities document, and with funding to be determined. But I think there's a number of different ways we could pay for the bins that we need. So, just another comment on this: we're in order to undertake the expanded capital work, and we'll see that later in some of our charts, but as well as to maintain our other ongoing engineering needs, a current half-time engineering technologist position in the engineering department will need to be made into a full-time position. So that's our ask around staffing to make sure that all these things get done. So this is a review of past expenditures from 2014 through 2018. You'll see that those are actual expenditures. 2019 and 2020 are budgeted looks at those years. On the operating side, it's fairly flat compared to the capital expenditures. Bit of a dip around 2017 to 2018 based on council's direction over those years. More of a move to looking at actual expenditures in various accounts as opposed to just adding on to previous years. We also assigned some engineering costs to capital projects because we felt that they were more they should be put to those rather than just operations. So we're up, increasing slightly from 2019 to 2020. On the capital side, you'll see a bit of a peak in 2016. That was the year we spent like 2.8 million of that was just on the Dry Creek protection works. So there was a number of larger projects in that year. You're looking towards 2019, obviously a big jump, and I think that we've heard that that's where council wants to go in investing in infrastructure. So we had about $4 million in 2019 just in water projects alone. Did a big water supply main twinning on Argyle Street. We're just about complete with the Argyle to Bird section. That was 1.6 million budgeted for that, and that's gone pretty well through Dry Creek, through the gully in there. I don't know if it's a little bit out of the public site, but that project's gone pretty well. And again in 2020, more water supply main replacement that we're asking for $1 million to carry on that work of replacing the supply main that goes all the way from Cowichan Reservoirs to Bird Street. Yeah, and also some money, we've earmarked money in the capital plan for some of the strategic projects around Argyle and 3rd Avenue as well, because we know if we're going to change everything up top, we've got old pipes in the ground there as well. So a little bit more work and research to do to see exactly what needs to be done, but put some placeholders in the budget for that as well. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So my question is regarding this graph here of how much we've spent in that. How much is cost recovery from the subdivisions? Because the contractors always pay a portion, don't they, for adding their infrastructure in? Is there?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you offhand what's included in those. If you're referring to development cost charges, or sometimes we're partnering with developers to,
to mitigate
like
some of
Bird,
this.
yeah, exactly. Bird Street's a good example of that, where repaving and putting in new sidewalks, and there wasn't separation there, so we've added some separation of sewer and stormwater there, so partnered with them on that. Yeah, sometimes the water needs to be upgraded.
Okay, and so that was one question. The other one was our aging infrastructure. I know a while back, Guy Cison, at that time, the city engineer, there was a presentation made to council about our aging infrastructure, and if we didn't put away money, we would be in trouble in years to come. And there was a study done. Or do we still look at that study and update it every so often, or how are we handling our aging infrastructure when we talk about the pipes and stuff that you're mentioning that we need to upgrade because they're really old? So maybe.
So,
okay,
you'll
we'll
see that's
one step ahead.
It's a bit of a common thread
Yes.
when we talk about the different areas that we look after.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the transportation side, obviously, yeah, we've got a lot of old pavement. We know across North America, probably across the world, that there's an increasing investment required. Things aren't getting any cheaper. We have some opportunities, as we're doing now, to partner with development. Our asset management plan that we're in the process of, we'll be implementing it in 2020. We think that'll help a lot to start to bring those numbers forward in a concise and organized way. It's just a matter of getting all our current information into that database and getting a system that'll work for us. Again, another issue, we know we have wide streets. Again, even saw it in Mr. Deacon's presentation around, just the look of that. It's a huge heat sink, all that asphalt, all the concrete. When we're trying to maintain those as they get older, it seems sometimes that we're spending good money chasing, fixing potholes on areas of road that never get driven on, so redesigning, so our opportunities are to redesign those, look at them in different ways, again, similar to some of council's strategic priority projects in those areas. We'll be looking to make better use of the right-of-way. Yeah, not paving 100 feet wide like Argyle Street is out here. So on bridges, another issue with our bridges, We know we've got some major structures that were built in the 50s. You know, a service life of a bridge has generally been considered 50 to 60 years, and we know we're beyond that. We've been able to extend the useful life by doing maintenance. You can see the maintenance going on right now on the Gertrude Street Bridge. You know, it's like a roof on your house, right? You keep the water out, keep everything dry, keep the vegetation away from the ends and that kind of thing. Will extend the useful life of those structures, and quite often they will last, you know, 70, 80 years, but we're probably in the last 10 to 20% of the life of those bridges, so something to consider in the future.
I have a question. Yeah.
Councillor Solda?
So when you're talking about the bridges, do we have a contingency fund put away for that, or is that just coming out of the ERF fund? Where is that money coming from? Because if you're saying 10 to 20 years of a lifespan, how much is a bridge to, it's not cheap to put in a bridge. So we should be putting something away in the kitty for a bridge, because I sure don't want to see taxpayers, I'll be really old and probably dead by then, but still, the whole thing is, we need to start looking at that future, so nobody's burdened with the tax. So is there something there?
Yeah, and I think, again, our asset management plan that we're working on will identify, I mean, those are major assets in our inventory that, you know, we'll put in the year it was built, we'll put in the service life, we'll have the estimates for what it costs in today's dollars, or 10 years down the road, what those dollars are. And again, yeah, that'll give the picture of what we're looking at in the future.
So that's something maybe to consider for the future, I don't know, to the CAO, through the chair, that we should look at having a contingency fund or something going into that, unless we start tolling bridges, but I sure don't want to toll bridges in Port Alberni, you know, so I'm just concerned about what a bridge is going to cost, and I'll be interested in seeing that report for sure. Thank you.
On the water side, or the waterworks side, again, aging infrastructure, we have a lot of infrastructure on the water side, you know, right from our intake up in China Creek to, you know, the intake at Bainbridge, and all the pipes in between town and those locations, and the pipes in the ground in town. Yeah, the risks are, you know, the longer we leave some of those pipes in the ground, the old asbestos cement pipes and cast iron, you know, you get leaks and failures. Luckily we're able to pick away at those and replace them as needed for now, but you know, we look for grants. We also, again, look to partner with development where upgrades are needed to service different developments. Was there a question on the?
Councillor Solda?
Me again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding, infrastructure is really big in my book, so, you know, like, I have lots of questions, and I might not understand it all the time because it's not my field, but pipes, regarding all the pipes in that, are we just piecemealing them, or are we actually replacing the whole thing? Because, you know, when you start patching things, you patch one, and then suddenly down the road it's bursts.
Yeah, and we'll usually look at, I mean, we'll replace leaks as they happen. I mean, if they're catastrophic, we may replace a larger section, but what sometimes happens in these, you know, if you have one or two breaks on a block, let's say, then we'll put that in the plan to replace the whole block.
Okay, so
and that, you know, that's how we develop a lot of our multi-year plans around the system.
okay.
So you'll see the projects that you see in capital have generally, that's what's happened. We've had a few leaks, and we know that that's going to ramp up over time.
Okay,
so we'll put it in the program and replace the whole block.
Excellent. Okay, I like that. Thank you.
So another issue in the water side is the possibility of one day having to build a filtration plant. Regulations could change. Yeah, that would be a huge price tag. You know, our opportunities are to keep going with our documentation, to keep our our testing and our compliance with the regulatory agencies going. You know, it's working now. We're lucky to have the two systems that we have. If we only had China Creek, let's say, we would be forced to build filtration for sure. So for now, I'd say, you know, we carry on the regulations. We're doing our best. We provide high quality water. Yeah. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Councillor Solda.
They hate it when I talk, you know.
It's okay.
But we're in compliance with the 4321, right? And I don't see that changing. I mean, in the years in 2013, there was a big push for the 4321, but I haven't heard any rumblings about upgrading that.
No, like I said, we're able to at, you know, this current time, and there's lots of, again, I'm on my next point there, you know,
Okay.
we've got water, as long as we keep our watersheds secure, do our best to work with industry and, you know, around logging and the recreation that goes on.
Just to put it into context, if for some reason we lost that documentation and were forced to go to filtration, just so people know roughly what the cost of that is. And other communities have been forced into that. I think Comox is, and a couple on the Sunshine Coast. So it's a scary thing.
Tens of millions.
Yeah.
If that's the question you're asking.
Yes, just
Yeah.
I want people to be aware. We're very fortunate to be in this situation where we don't have filtration regulated to us. And when we had the meetings with the watersheds committee, VHA and other regulatory people came to those meetings and indicated to us they're watching us very closely. Every year, and I'm not sure how often you meet with them now, but
Yeah, and dialogue is ongoing.
yeah,
For sure, yeah.
so we're lucky to have that.
So on the wastewater and stormwater side, again, I could have put aging infrastructure up there again. It's, again, the pipes in the ground, it's the same as the others. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades, maybe not so much an issue. However, completion is slated for probably, you know, sometime in 2020, probably mid 2020 by the time it's commissioned and everything's changed over from the existing lagoons to the new lagoons. Yeah, that'll take some time away from our existing utility staff, just in terms of learning the new system, becoming trained. We're in a higher classification of system with our new plant. Means some higher certifications, so there'll be some training requirements for our operators, that kind of thing. Won't affect so much in 2020's budget, but going forward it may. We'll have to see how much extra work that causes us. Yeah, just on the things are going well. I don't know if you're seeing, you can probably see a lot from town now with the outfall construction underway. They've actually dug the entire trench as of today or yesterday. They've got the trench dug, and now pretty soon you'll see the pipe floated out and buried in that trench. So yeah, lot of progress being shown there right now. Yeah, on the wastewater and stormwater side, climate change, increased storm intensity and duration, system sizing. Some of the engineering standards are even changing around that. So pipes are needing to be designed bigger for the storms that we're having. That, you know, they say are caused by climate change. Luckily, we've put money into projects around separating the Sandy storm. A lot of good work we've been done in the Coal Creek Basin over the last couple of years. That's helped a lot. Yeah, and development, quite often, you know, the more you pave, the more you put buildings on it, you know, has downstream effects. So where you might be sized adequately now, those developments might cause or cause upgrades downstream as well. So we're looking again for partnerships on those developments. Garbage, a residential garbage program. So some issues there are service changes that are coming. Again, spoke about working with the ACRD. The change management around that will be, if it's a risk, it might be a difficulty. It'll mean some public education. Again, change is not always received all that well, but it will mean increased services if we can get everything running and get both sides of our trucks filled every week. Again, being a bear smart community, you know, need to limit those human and bear interactions and yeah, show that we can reduce the negative impact on the wildlife, you know, and it's not just bears, there's other animals that are getting into garbage as well when that's left out. Some fees, I think over the last few years we're barely and probably not covering the total cost of the service. So some of that has been, you know, subsidized by the tax dollar. So we'll be looking to make sure that our garbage fees cover the cost of the service. And again, some of those numbers have yet to be worked out with the new services.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With so much recycling now, and now with the organic waste that are going to be recycled, has there been any discussion about when all this takes place, maybe move to a bi-weekly garbage pickup instead of weekly?
Yeah, that would be part of the discussion because organics would be every week. Yes. Garbage would be every second week.
Okay, that makes sense then.
And then there's an opportunity also to maybe pick up the contract for the recycling to take in that every second week, the other side of the truck on the other
Okay.
week, right?
Perfect, thank you.
So our 60/40 truck, does it still pick up from the curb side of the truck all the time? Like, will it pick up and then go over the
Yes.
the
Yeah.
60% of garbage and go into the 40%?
Yeah, it's got a splitter
It'd
and
be the same arm though, eh?
yeah, same arm.
Okay.
Yeah, they just move the chute.
Just
And,
hyperextend it and, yeah, okay.
yeah,
Thanks.
no, it actually there's a chute that moves back and forth from one side to the other.
I just want to get some education on the garbage trucks myself. So they're dual use, so that we can use part of it for organics and the other for regular garbage. When I look at our capital spending for 5 years, I noticed that the Freightliner garbage trucks are on here, and I can't quite make out what year the ERF is to be planned for. I'm not sure if it's 2023 or 2024, but in your experience, what is the lifespan of a garbage truck in this day and age? 4 years, 5 years?
Yeah, I wished I knew offhand how long we had the last ones, but in this, with our 3 trucks, we're actually rotating. So 2 are out every day and we're rotating the 3rd. So we're actually extending the life. And I don't have the ERF fund in front of me, but that certainly, I know in my previous life, we were replacing them about every 4 years, every 4 to 5 years. I don't know if anybody knows offhand here, but I think we're up to at least 8 years. You know, because we have the extra one. Yeah, I can get back to you on that, and it'll be probably, I just don't have the numbers, yeah. Yeah, so we bought them in, yeah.
They're listed here to be replacing us.
Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just a quick question just to follow up from Councillor Coastland. Have we changed the arms? I know you can can you change those arms? Because they mechanically, after a while, they break down, right?
Yeah, they're pretty resilient.
They are,
The helping hand arms that we haven't had any problems with those. We had a lot of problems with the last trucks, but it wasn't,
Okay.
we never had any problems with the arms.
So
There are wear parts on them, But, yeah.
So for the lifespan, if it's every, like, 4 years, can they not go a little longer? If the arm's not the issue, what's the issue then, that we would have to change them like every 4 years approximately?
It's really the use, the number of hours on the
It's the
truck
hours.
and the engine and the chassis and, yeah. So we're not, just to be clear, we're not planning on replacing these in 4 years.
Okay, you mentioned 8 years. Right?
Yeah,
8 years?
and again, I'm going on memory as to
Okay.
what they are in the IRF, currently in the IRF.
So what will come before council basically is what the cost has been to, like, any fixing up and stuff. I always do it where the cost of repairing something and it's continuous, then maybe it's time to look at something.
Absolutely, and
else.
that becomes part of why, when we decide it's
Okay.
time to replace them. And quite often, a lot of the equipment in IRF, if we look at them, they haven't been giving us problems, we'll move them ahead in the plan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So this slide shows projected revenue by service. So under water, sewer, and garbage, or water, wastewater, and garbage. So those fees are intended to cover the cost of the service. We've been working at this for quite a number of years, and if we had a slide of the last 5 years prior to this, you'd probably see a lot steeper increase. So the revenue projections here in the draft budget are intended to cover the cost of the service over the life of this plan. So you see, we get more revenue out of water than we do out of wastewater, and quite a bit less out of garbage. But it's a good indication of the relative costs of those, or the revenue, which also mirrors the costs on the other side. And this slide, yeah, so this is actually the 2020 operating expenditures by service. PowerPoint was smart enough to pick up on that water was blue and wastewater was that nice brown color. So, and while it does kind of look like the wastewater is the largest slice of the pie, the water actually is, it's hard to read the numbers on there. I think it's a little over 5 million on the water and just over 4 on the wastewater. So that shows, yeah, the relative costs of garbage, roads and streets, public works admin, equipment, and the storm drainage portion. And if there's any more questions? Thank you.
One quick question. It just has to do with the whole discussion around aging infrastructure and those sorts of things. Is there any indication of federal support, even nationwide, with regards to grants and federal or provincial grants that in your industry that you're kind of maybe getting wind of? That, because every community in Canada and North America is having the problem, obviously, and I think that a few years ago, our engineer came forward and said we're about 10 years in arrears in our infrastructure replacement, and we might even be further than that. I can't remember, but I'm just wondering if the governmental grants or
Yeah, there's
the
always
feds or the province are taking any responsibility.
there's always new grant programs coming up, and I know Mr. Deacon forwarded some information on a grant just this week. We haven't had a chance to discuss what projects would be likely or applicable to that, but yeah, it seems that there are some, we've done well with grants as well, right, as you know, for the lagoon and some other projects. So yeah, always looking, always seeing what's out there.
It's good to hear the sewage plant's on track, and I think it's the largest infrastructure project we've ever had.
Certainly is. And while nobody's asked, there is a report coming. I'll get that to you. I was going to say the second meeting in December, but there isn't one, so it'll have to be the first one in January.
Thank you so much. Saving the best for last. That's what I've been saying all week to everybody. So tough acts to follow, though, for sure. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the planning and building department. And as you're probably all accustomed to now, there's a bit of a formulaic approach to these presentations. So I have tried very hard not to stray too far from that. Well, I used to say to my dad, think outside the circle when I was a kid, because I thought I was clever, but he still brings that up to this day. So the mission of the planning department and building department is to help plan and build an inclusive, safe, vibrant, and sustainable future for Port Alberni. And how we do that is by working in collaboration with developers, stakeholders, service providers, other departments, I should mention as well, and the public. And we review information and advise decision makers, and do a lot of analytical thinking and all that fun stuff that revolves around regulations and bylaws and things like that. So that's kind of us at a high level. Our core services kind of can be split up in 3 key areas: planning and land use management, development services, and building inspection. So you've probably got well accustomed to my many presentations at council, so you probably have a pretty good understanding of that. Some of the things that you might not interface with as much, though, would be the building inspection side. So our building inspector, does building permits and inspections, demolition permits. He's heavily involved with business licenses, involved in the nuisance property committee, and does on-site inspections with fire and bylaw. That's stuff that council doesn't usually typically see, but we do on a daily basis. The rest of the stuff usually comes before you, so you should be a bit more accustomed to that. So looking at our financial performance over the last 7 years, so 2013 to 2019, you can see that our revenue and our expenses mirror each other pretty nicely, and they're pretty stable. But I can point out a few kind of key interesting facts that might be a bit helpful to explaining some of the peaks and valleys here. So if you look at 2013 at our expenses, they were a little bit higher that year, and that's because there was about $150,000 dedicated to some OCP community plan review, and I believe that was when I wasn't here then, so I don't know the details, but I believe that's when we introduced development permit areas, and so the money that would have been spent for one-time consultation services to actually help us introduce development permit areas. So we got multifamily, commercial, and industrial development permit areas out of that process. So that's great. Zooming forward to looking at 2018, 2019 expenses, you see a bit of a dip there, and I believe that that's a result of the former director of development services leaving and being replaced by me, and there was a bit of a 4-month gap there. So I think that's what that's related to. And then 2018, you just see kind of a peak there in revenue. That's just, there was just higher value and more projects on the go. And 2019 actually hasn't likely dipped. It's just because that's only till the end of September. So you're missing a couple months of data there. So that just helps kind of explain some of the details there. Looking at their projected revenue by service, you can see our numbers that we project are pretty consistent, though it's really hard to say. Some years, we have more development than others, and so that's going to impact the type of revenue that we bring in through fees and charges and building permits and things like that. I think one thing to point out here is that our fees are pretty low. Earlier this year, when we had a manager of bylaw, he was beginning to review our fees and charges bylaw, and we had put together some information from the planning and building department on recommendations on how to modernize our fees and kind of bring them up to best practices, but that never got brought forward because he departed. So hopefully that's something we can pick up again in the future. Our fees are quite low, and so if there's, our fees aren't meant to necessarily recover cost, but we could definitely modernize ourselves and be more in line with what other communities are doing, if council wishes to do so. So, strategic projects. There's a lot on here, so I'm not going to go through all the details, but I will say that within council's strategic plan, there is about 62 specific initiatives, and I went through them, and the planning department is either involved with or a key player in over 50% of those. So there's a lot. So I'm not going to go into the details of that because you know what your plan is, but I think it's important for you to remember this slide when we kind of talk through the next couple of slides here. And it's great, and I just want to emphasize that we think our department really feels that it's a strong plan. It's pointed in the right direction. We can see that you're operating on a change mandate, and we're excited about that. We definitely have some concerns, though, about how we're going to be able to help you deliver on that. So we'll talk about that over the next few minutes, which is right now. So we'll talk about the issues, risks, and opportunities. So I've broken this up into kind of planning and land use and building to keep them a bit more separate, but the themes are essentially the same. And really those themes are around our operating capacity with limited staff and limited resources. So I'll start off with the increase in volume of files and projects. So we've seen a 25% increase this year alone in the number of applications being processed. And I should stress that that's just applications. So that's not people coming to meet with me. That's not people phoning or inquiring. That's not working with staff on other projects. That's just applications alone. There's been a 25% increase. That means that there's less support for clients because we're stretched thinner and there's slower processing times. And I hear that daily. I hear that on a daily basis, that people are frustrated with that. And we do the best that we can to keep things moving along and try to come up with innovative solutions, but sometimes it's just the reality of where we're at. So the opportunity there is to hire additional development and planning staff. Similar to that theme, we have very limited ability to support social planning projects. So earlier this year, there's been a request to review and bring forward recommendations about a social planning committee. And other than the 30 seconds that I probably thought about putting it in this slide, I haven't had any other capacity to work on that report. Beyond that, there's a list of other ongoing social planning projects that we just have very limited capacity to actually move forward. So the housing needs assessment, the age-friendly assessment, childcare needs assessment, and ongoing social housing projects. So there's a bunch of social planning work that needs to be done, and if we don't do it, it's going to have immediate and long-term impacts on the community. So the opportunity there would be to think about social planning and how we support that with staff, or to think about strategic opportunities to collaborate with the ACRD or look at contracting and consulting opportunities. And then similar to the last one here, we have no dedicated front desk staff. So that also has impacts to our ability to kind of operate and serve clients and developers.
So a quick question from Councilor Poon.
Yep.
How many staff do you currently have, and how many staff would you need to deliver on all of them, all these items?
How about I answer that at the end, because I
Sure.
do get through it throughout the rest of the presentation. So, excellent question. Again, very similar. We have reliance on one city planner, and the key issues there, if the planner's away or something happens, they're pulled away on a different project, applications are essentially stalled. So it's really just an ability to focus and keep things moving, and that's limited when you have reliance on one staff. So similar opportunities there. I guess the other thing that I just kind of wanted to highlight, all of these are kind of in the same theme, and so I'm sorry to put the pressure on you in terms of that. I want to be clear that we are very, very supportive of the strategic plan and of the community, and our department is very passionate about the work that we do and moving things along, but we're feeling quite strapped. So that's just a very important message that I want to help you be aware of so that we can work together on solutions. So.
Yeah, so on your opportunities, it says hire additional staff, increase consulting budget, and you know how the community loves consultants. So what is it for that you're looking at for consulting is when you say increase that budget?
I really for any of the additional projects that are above and beyond our core services. So beyond just processing applications and managing land use and development issues, anything like we've been working, Wilf and I have been working with a consultant on the 3rd Street improvements to make sure that that was kind of accelerated and that project from the strategic plan is being advanced in an expedited fashion.
So this is nothing we have on the shelf already.
These are
something
high level suggestions that aren't reflected in the current budget.
But they're not going to go back on the shelf after they're done. We are actually, because we want to move forward on that, right?
Yeah.
If I don't want a shelf anymore. And if there's anything on the shelf that we can use, we take a look at that too, right?
Yeah, and I know we often refer to the shelf as kind of a bad place, but the shelf is a place where the policies and procedures and standards exist and need to be updated and reviewed to ensure that we're getting the right type of development for the community, right? So I understand that there's a natural desire for us to move forward quickly in an expedited fashion, but if we as an organization don't have any policy or B, well-developed and well-thought-out policy, then we actually have very limited capacity to ask for the things that we want. And that's where the planning department really comes into play.
And I understand that. When there's a grant out there, we need to be ready for that grant. And the other thing too is what was good 10 years ago, there's something better now that we can justify,
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to include some data here around our development application trends for the last 7 years. And as I mentioned, we've seen a 25% increase in this past year alone between 2018 and 2019. But really an overall ongoing increase over the last 7 years. And I don't think that's going to stop. The market did slow down a little bit over the last year, but things continue to speed up. And I think I would anticipate, based on the number of people that I'm starting to talk to about next year, that that's going to continue to go forward. So just good to have the data, though. Moving on to the building inspection issues, risks, and opportunities, very, very similar to the planning department. Our building inspector is working at full capacity. There's a greater number of files on his desk, and his productivity is often minimized by the fact that he works alone, and he's the only building inspecting staff that we have. Sometimes there's gaps in service if he is away or on leave, so there's issues that get created there. We do have a partnership with the ACRD where we're able to work with them in absences of our building inspector to lean on them for service. Unfortunately, it's proving to be increasingly difficult when they're also facing the same issues that we have. So when our building inspector was just away recently for a few weeks, we were working with the ACRD, and they had to limit it to 1 or 2 days a week that they were able to kind of come in on a piecemeal approach and help building permit files not completely stall. And we're grateful for that, but it's just a reality of the nature of that relationship and how we might need to review that. And again, similar to planning, just want to throw in the building data there to help explain the narrative. So building permits, the number of building permits being processed annually over the last 7 years. And because we only had data till the end of November, I just talked to our building inspector, and he said he's probably going to process about another 30 before the end of the year, which would be the end of the month. So on track to be just about the same as last year, maybe a little bit ahead of that or above that. So looking at our draft 2020 budget that you have in front of you, a few things that I really want to highlight. First of all, the planning fees and charges, that's what's budgeted, that's not actual, so that $23,000 will probably be about 25% higher. Not all application fees are the same, so not exactly 25%, but it will be a higher number than 23,000 when we get the actuals. Moving down to the expenses, what we've budgeted in 2020, and a big thank you for this is an additional planning staff. That's a huge deal, and we really, really appreciate that. But that's why there's that extra $100,000 more or less there, and a 40% increase. The $80,000 there is to help us move forward with reviewing our OCP. So again, a one-time kind of consulting fee to bring some consultants in and help us do the OCP work. We're hoping to also get some additional grant money to top that up a little bit. And I just wanted to point out that I know the 69% looks very, very large, and I know what Tim and I were thinking about, he's like, wow, that's a huge increase, but I wanted to put a little asterisk on that and say it's because we have a very small budget. And when you add anything to a small budget, it's going to look like a big increase. So I just wanted to point that out to not scare anybody too much.
Yeah, and I also look at your budget when I look at what's happening in this community, all the development, the old ADSS site. There's a lot of development, Rainbow Gardens up by the shelter. All that is bigger than we've had in a long time. So the ADSS development is huge. So, and even some of these subdivisions. So there's a big difference for what was and what is happening now. And we want to streamline more development in this community. And if you're so busy and you can't get from A to B, how are you going to do this? And how do we move forward without something?
And thank you for that point, because you actually reminded me of two other important points that I meant to mention earlier. One is that the complexity of files that we're dealing with now are probably more complex than in previous years. They're larger scale developments, so that just requires more work in and of itself. And then the other issue is that it's not necessarily reflected in our revenue, but the planning department does through subdivision, and the building department through building DCCs. We bring in DCC revenue that goes towards the organization, and that's not reflected in here. It goes somewhere else, and the acting director of finance can maybe speak to that a bit more if you want, but that's something I think just to be cognizant of, that there's more money that the department is actually a key component of bringing in that's not actually reflected in here.
Well, the other thing too, it increases our tax base. What's happening?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So just to look at the recommended 2020 operating budget in a bit more of a visual, it's really, I think, just good to kind of understand that we don't have any capital expenses, right? We're all service oriented. It's all staff or contracts or things like operations. So that's really where the majority of it is, and where the projected expenditures are going to continue to be next year and moving forward. And then I guess to speak to Councillor Poon's excellent question, which I was anticipating, is how many staff do we have? And I just thought it would be good to throw a comparison in there. We have other municipalities that we've compared ourselves to, but I thought these three were particularly relevant because they're a bit smaller, but similar size. Some are nearby, similar kind of economies, similar geographies. I think Nelson, while it's a lot smaller than us, is a really good community to compare ourselves to, just in terms of geography and what's going on and the potential that we have to kind of model ourselves off of similar successes. So that's where we're at. We have 3 staff, and a lot of other planning departments have a lot more staff than us, and that's going to impact the way we handle land use issues and the way we help support you in the strategic plan. So I just would ask you to be mindful of this. If there's days when I'm a little bit slow, and I just want to say thank you again for hopefully allowing us to have one more staff person, because that will make a huge difference in processing applications and keeping things moving along.
Thank you. First, Councillor Poon.
Thank you. Well, it's amazing what you've been able to do with 3 staff, but what do you think about, will you be asking for more staff in the future to meet these goals that we have?
If I could be very honest and frank, I would ask for more staff if I could. Absolutely. Yeah.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. Being part of the Advisory Planning Commission, I realized about 6 months ago that you need an extra staff person. You've been very busy.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any more questions for the plan? Caitlin, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Since our gallery is rather thin, I guess we have no questions from the public.
And no press.
And no press tonight, so. City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just been to give you the heads up that Monday you will be having your regular meeting of council at 2 o'clock. And then the next Committee of the Whole meeting is Tuesday, the 10th, starting at 6, at which time you will hear from BC Transit, SPCA, and the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society.
Thank you. Anything from UCAO?
Mr. Mayor, no. Any questions or input from council as far as what you want to see in the ongoing process?
Councilor Solda?
I'm just kind of curious, okay, so after the 10th, then what do we go to? What is the next step? And also if there's questions that have come up from all this, the presentations, will we be able to ask them, you know, as we sit at home and dwell on all this budget stuff, right?
Yeah, you've absorbed a lot this week, and I thank you for your patience and your attention as the departments have brought you their overview of their departments, and especially where they pointed out issues faced by those departments. I know at times it must feel like we're all saying we're too busy and we all need more staff, but there needed to be a place somewhere where you got to learn where the challenges were in every department. So we very much appreciate that you were respectful in listening to that. I'm going to ask the Deputy Clerk again to speak to next steps after that.
Yes, and forgive me, I'm going by memory right now. I believe the meeting of council on January 13th would be the intention that you were to be presented with the financial plan bylaw itself and actually look for a first reading to the bylaw, which will act as an introductory piece for you. I believe the intent is to, after the conclusion of these presentations and the one next week, to summarize the feedback that's been received and present possibly an amended package that incorporates some of the direction that council is going to give in the meeting in January. After the 13th, there is a time frame where staff look to council to invite public participation and feedback. And specifically what that looks like, council has yet to direct staff to, whether it be surveys, roundtables, town hall type meeting. I believe you did an town hall meeting last budget round, so that might be something that interests you. But there's definitely, I believe, about a six weeks that allows for that public engagement, additional public engagement, because these sessions as well were public engagement opportunities.
And Mr. Mayor, between now and the January 13th regular meeting of council, I expect that we will be reaching out to all councillors and saying, if you have questions that that you want to see answered, please forward those to us. We'll bring those all together and then bring them to the first budget meeting, which is probably likely January 20th, I would think, a week after the next regular meeting, so that rather than you coming to that meeting with a bunch of questions and we go away for a week to find the answers, if you can bring us those questions first, we'll bring them all together and we'll start off with, here's the 3 questions that council had, and or 33, and then here's the answers, and that'll be a good starting point. Does that work for council?
Yep.
So the thing is, you just finished saying the first reading is going to be on the 13th, but if we bring the questions in on the 20th, we might change our mind
You would bring
in that time.
You would bring the questions prior to a meeting on a budget meeting, a committee of the whole meeting on the 20th. And the first reading is different than we've done in previous years, but Twyla's here now, and it is, she's really advised us what is the correct procedure is give the draft budget, first reading, and then it's on the table to discuss. And then you'll make all your changes to it.
Okay.
Rather than in the past, we would talk about a draft budget that hadn't really been introduced.
Okay, that's great, because I won't be back from holidays until the, the 18th, so, just so you know that.
So you'll be able to give us your questions before you go.
I sure hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
I'll have my questions
we'll
ready.
prepare answers for those.
Okay.
I'm sure you will.
Thanks, Dan.
Councillor Paulson.
It's a kind of a new process that we're going through this year, and being an old guy, I get a little confused, but I would really like an opportunity for us to be able to go through the Capital 2020, 2024 document from top to bottom, and also just a quick review of the strategic priorities worksheet that we received as well. I think it's worthwhile reviewing, kind of to have some discussion there. So I don't know when that might happen, but we're not receiving an options list this year, I gather. We're not receiving an options list this year, I gather.
Mr. Mayor, no, we didn't bring an options list this year, and it's a good question. It was our understanding that that wasn't necessarily council's desire to have an options list. So what you saw with the department presentations where we pointed out the issues was kind of took the place of the options list, where we had that opportunity to say, here's some things we'd like you to think about. And as opposed to put them on a list and ask you to opt them in. If you would like us to develop one, we can. We're really trying to find a way to support council in considering the budget. So it's very helpful if you tell us what you need. If you want an options list, we'll produce one. If you don't think you want one, then we won't.
I would go with the rest of council with regards to the options list, but as you alluded to, this was a pretty heavy presentation this week, and there was a lot of information there to digest, in particular with regards to staffing and those sorts of things. And for me, I kind of need something in black and white that shows those numbers and documented, and something that I can look at and work with and say, you know, that looks good, but can we do some massaging and moving?
Sure.
It's kind of where I'm at right now with the process, and just I need a little more workshop type stuff going on too.
Sure. So at our December 10th meeting, we'll bring you next steps and
that's great.
spell that out a little better. When we get back into the new year, one of the first things we'll do in the budget cow is to review the capital plan, the 5-year capital plan, and we can go through the strategic work plan as well if that's what you want to do. And then I think your questions will be about some of the items in the operating budget, and then rather than go line by line through a 25-page document, on that document we might rely on your questions to take us where you need to go.
Just the last thing I want to say is I'm really pleased that we're in this process at this time of year.
Okay.
And we haven't had that luxury in the past, and I think it just creates more comfort. We don't feel pressured, and I'm sure hopefully the staff doesn't feel as pressured as we have with timelines in the spring and stuff. So thank you very much for getting us to this point and getting started. So thanks.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you talked about community engagement and different opportunities for us, can we do a combination of things? For example, online plus public engagement or some kind of a town hall?
Absolutely, and that was, we'll highlight some of those options again. That was in a report that I can't even recall when we presented that first outline that proposed some of the options. So absolutely, we'll bring that forward.
Councillor Solda.
Yeah, I've had a lot of the community members ask me about community engagement. How can they get involved and be involved? So just so you're aware of that, I do like the online stuff too. A lot of my questions too will be regarding replacement vehicles, like especially the fire department. Why do we need, I understand about the fire truck and that, but I still, is a big high-end item, but the vehicle there and going to a hybrid and different things, why do we need to change it? Do they really need to change it? You know, I know it's in the budget. There's some other vehicles on the budget list I would like to have more information on, so I'll be asking those mainly.
Excellent for us to know that, and if council likes, we can bring our fleet manager here, Wayne Cheveldave, and we've done that in past years, and he can tell you, go line by line with the vehicles, and tell you what the projected replacement date was, whether we've pushed it back already or not, that kind of thing.
Okay, perfect. Anything else for city staff? Look, I know.
was all in the PowerPoint.
He's taking it in, he's
Yeah.
taking it in.
Well, thank you for coming out tonight, and we'll take this home and digest it and see you all on Monday. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Second? Okay, we're done. Thank you very much.